The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as nurses moved in a coordinated ballet of life and death. Monitors beeped steadily. Families waited in tense silence. A new life had just entered the world, but in a few minutes death would follow it closely. No one in St. Mercy Hospital saw it coming. No one could have predicted that one joyful event, the birth of a child, would spiral into a blood-soaked nightmare. A young father, overwhelmed by emotions darker than anyone understood, crossed an invisible line, dragging everyone else into his unraveling mind. The first shot cracked through the sterile air at exactly 2:13 a.m., shattering glass and sending an echo of terror down the white halls. In an instant, the hospital transformed from a place of healing into a war zone. It began, as these things often do, with love. Noah Gentry had been pacing the maternity ward for hours, a nervous, trembling man of 28 who seemed too fragile for the storm coming. His wife Amber was in labor, and every contraction pulled a little more sanity from him. Nurses offered him smiles, cups of coffee, calming reassurances. But underneath, they felt something off. Noah barely spoke. His hands shook constantly. He stared too long at the emergency exit signs. He mumbled under his breath. When their baby boy finally cried his first cry, Noah collapsed into a chair, sobbing with a mixture of relief and panic. He had not slept in 48 hours. He had not eaten, and he had not taken his medication. Amber had begged him to stay on his prescriptions, but Noah, in his paranoia, believed the pills were poisoning him. By the time the baby arrived, the chemical imbalance inside him had reached a fever pitch. Something in him finally snapped. In the moments after the birth, as doctors cleaned the baby and congratulated Amber, Noah disappeared into the shadows of the hallway, slipped into an empty room meant for janitors, pulled out a duffel bag hidden inside a supply closet, and unzipped it to reveal a semi-automatic rifle. He had planned this moment. Somewhere deep inside the fractures of his mind, Noah believed his son had been swapped at birth, that the real baby had been stolen, that the nurses were part of a grand conspiracy, that he had to fight to save his family. The rifle was cold in his hands, but it gave him a warmth that nothing else could. As his fingers closed around the trigger, the world narrowed into black and white simplicity, friends and enemies, saviors and traitors. There was no gray left in Noah's mind. The first bullet smashed through the glass window of the neonatal unit. Mothers screamed, nurses ducked for cover, an alarm blared. Noah moved down the hall, methodical, slow, a soldier in a war only he could see. He fired at anyone who moved. He believed he was rescuing his child. Security guards rushed toward the sound of gunfire but were hopelessly outmatched. One was shot before he could draw his weapon. The other ran for the exit to call police. Meanwhile, parents and staff barricaded themselves inside rooms, pulling beds and chairs against the doors, whispering prayers into the darkness. The hospital's intercom system crackled alive. A trembling voice said, "Active shooter. Lockdown. Shelter in place." The building, once alive with the sounds of life beginning, now echoed with the sound of life ending. Blood pooled on linoleum floors. Crying babies shrieked in terror. Somewhere in a delivery room, Amber clutched her newborn son to her chest, tears streaming down her face, realizing that the man she loved was the man now killing strangers in the next hallway. Police sirens wailed outside. Officers poured into the hospital with tactical gear and rifles drawn. A SWAT team assembled in the parking lot. Paramedics stood frozen, unsure whether to move the wounded or wait for the all clear. Negotiators set up a command center near the ambulance bay. They tried to reach Noah through loudspeakers, begging him to surrender, but Noah did not hear them. His world was sealed shut. He was lost inside a nightmare of his own creation. Inside the hospital, chaos reigned. Some nurses tried to move patients to safer locations, pushing gurneys down blood-slicked corridors. Others hid wherever they could, locking themselves inside broom closets, stairwells, and bathrooms. The sound of gunshots echoed again and again. Each bang was a thunderclap of terror. Each second stretched into a lifetime. Noah made his way toward the pediatric wing, convinced that the kidnappers were hiding his real son there. His shirt was stained with sweat and blood. His breathing came in ragged gasps. In his mind, he was a hero. He imagined the news headlines proclaiming him as the father who fought back. He imagined his son growing up knowing his father had saved him, A horrifying reality was far different. In his rampage, Noah had already taken 6 lives to nurses, a doctor, a security guard, and 2 fathers, who had been visiting their newborn children. The SWAT team moved methodically through the hospital, clearing rooms, evacuating survivors. They found huddled families hiding under beds, their eyes wide with terror. They found hurt coworkers bleeding behind overturned desks. They found a maternity nurse who had shielded a newborn baby with her body, saving the child's life at the cost of her own. Noah reached the pediatric ward and slammed through the double doors. Nurses screamed and scattered. A pediatric surgeon, Dr. Anthony Reyes, stepped into Noah's path, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "You don't have to do this," Dr. Reyes said, his voice steady, despite the gun pointed at his heart. "Your child is safe. No one took him. Please, let us help you." For a moment Noah wavered. Tears filled his eyes. His rifle dipped lower. But then a loudspeaker blared again, warning of police presence. And Noah interpreted it as proof that the conspirators were closing in. He raised the rifle. Dr. Reyes did not flinch. He only said, "Please, Noah, your son needs you alive." The word struck something deep inside Noah's fractured soul. The standoff lasted 20 minutes. Negotiators begged, SWAT officers surrounded him. Parents wept behind barricaded doors. Finally, in a moment that no one who survived that night would ever forget, Noah dropped the rifle. He sank to the floor, sobbing. Officers rushed in. They did not shoot him. They handcuffed him gently, treating him not like a monster, but like a man broken beyond repair. The aftermath was a grim landscape of mourning and questions. News helicopters circled overhead. Reporters camped outside the hospital gates. Candlelight vigils sprouted along the sidewalks. 6 dead, 9 wounded, hundreds traumatized. And at the center of it all, a tiny newborn boy who would grow up with a terrible legacy attached to his name. In the days that followed, investigators pieced together the timeline. They discovered Noah's history of untreated schizophrenia. They learned he had stopped taking his medications 2 months before the birth. They found online forums where Noah had fallen into the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories about hospitals swapping babies for profit. In hindsight, there had been warning signs. Friends described him as paranoid. Family members admitted they had noticed his decline but did not know how to intervene. Amber, shattered by grief and betrayal, filed for full custody of their son from behind hospital walls as she recovered from both childbirth and the emotional wounds left by her husband's violence. The hospital eventually reopened. Walls were patched, floors were scrubbed clean, but nothing could erase the scars burned into the memories of those who had been there. Nurses flinched at sudden noises. Doctors carried silent guilt. Survivors attended therapy sessions in groups, sharing nightmares they could not speak aloud elsewhere. Children born that night grew up hearing whispers of what had happened. The story became legend, a ghost that haunted the halls of St. Mercy long after the blood had been washed away. As for Noah, he stood trial 18 months later. His defense attorneys argued insanity. Prosecutors presented a chilling portrait of a man who planned his actions in advance. In the end, the jury found him guilty, but mentally ill. He was sentenced to life in a psychiatric prison, where he would receive treatment he should have had long before that terrible night. Amber moved out of state. She changed her and her son's names. She refused all interviews. She refused to let her son be defined by the sins of his father. She built a new life from the ashes of the old one. Quiet, steady, far from hospitals and birth wards. Far from the place where life and death collided so violently. And yet the story of that night lingered. In the quiet halls of hospitals everywhere, the anxious eyes of new fathers pacing maternity wards. In the whispered prayers of nurses who understood all too well how quickly joy could turn into horror, it lingered in the memory of a tiny boy, someday to be told the truth when he was old enough to understand. A reminder that love alone is not enough to save a broken mind. That sometimes the people who seem most vulnerable are the ones capable of the most unimaginable destruction. And that healing, true healing, begins not with forgetting but with remembering. Remembering everything. The joy, the terror, the shattered glass, and the sobbing apologies. The blood. The hope, the life that began amidst the wreckage. Because even after the worst night of their lives, Even after St. Mercy Hospital turned into a war zone, life found a way to continue. Life somehow always does.